Socrates the man lived in ancient Greece. Use your thigh. Use a folder. Shows us the value of educating democratic citizens. Inspired the most important generation of Greek philosophy. Greek philosophy. There's a lot to unpack here. We could unpack ancient Greece. We could unpack democratic citizens. What do we mean by that? We could unpack the first generation Greek philosophers. I could just start rattling off to you facts about Socrates' life. When he lived, who he was married to, what was the prison like where he ended his life. Was he ugly? Was he attractive? He went down in history as being profoundly ugly. Don't look at him, but listen to him. But before we do that, I want to ask you a question. And for this, I want you to pull out a blank sheet of paper, if there's any paper that's under your chair. So instead of me just rattling off to you about Socrates, I would like you, and you're actually going to write down a paper, and adults in the room, you're doing this too. You should all have a blank full-size sheet of paper. The question that I want you to answer on this paper is, what are the most important things to know about a person? What are the most important things to know about a person? When you go off to high school, whether it's Socrates or elsewhere, what should we remember about Luke, or Nicholas, or Miss Pellegrini? You have 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, right, Mustangs. Mustangs, check out what's making here. Put it out. Beautiful. Let's read. Let's hear from each other. What are some of the most important things to know? Let's hear from three people. What's your name?
Yeah.
Can you read our peers to us?
What they did, how they were like.
What they did, notice that. What did you do? What they were like. Yeah. Is it Juliana? Great.
Their personality.
Personalities. Great. Ethan. Look at that. Can we pause there? How they treat themselves and others. Lena? How much of an effect they had on the world. What did none of these say? Can we hear from at least two adults in the room? What did none of these say? Remind me of your last name?
Lead.
Miss Lee.
When they were
None of them said what's the most important thing is what you look like. What else did they not say? At least one of our adults wrote this morning.
How much wealth they did.
How much wealth do they have? Now, are we saying that looks are not important? No, no one said that. Are we saying that wealth is not important in creators? No, no one said that. But we said those are not the most important things. Socrates never wrote anything down, and yet he is definitely one of the top three most influential individuals in human history, along with Jesus of Nazareth and Muhammad, the prophet of Islam. Let me tell you a little bit about Socrates. He lived from 469 to 399 BC. He was an Athenian citizen. He had a wife named Xanthippe. Xanthos is the Greek word for blonde. Hippe, Cheyenne, is the Greek word for horse. So it means blonde horse. By the way, we could change our name from Mustangs. Translate that into Greek would be the Hippos. Because the ancient Greek word for horse is hippos. There we go. Boom. So a hippopotamus, hippos is horse, hippopotamus is river. So a hippopotamus is a river horse. So it's an animal that looks so darn big, it looks like a horse, but it hangs out in water. So we call it a river horse. But none of this tells you why Socrates is so famous. Here's why he's so famous. Because he attracted in his life a curious following of individuals in philosophical one-on-one, or at least close group conversations. He was tried and executed by his fellow citizens for impiety, that is, for religious crimes, and for corrupting you. Socrates was executed for making the children bad, for corrupting the youth. He was the inspiration for Plato and other philosophers such as Aristotle, who you may have heard of, and they inspired them to open philosophical schools. In fact, the subjects that you now study in school and that you will study in university are the way they are because of Socrates. Here's why. Because Socrates influenced his student Plato. Plato influenced his student Aristotle. Plato started his own school. Aristotle left Plato's school to start his own. And in medieval Europe, in around 1000, 1100, 1200, when we were starting the first universities, they were all modeled off of Aristotle's books. Aristotle wrote shelves of books. That's why we take classes on biology and physics and ethics and metaphysics and mathematics, because those are the titles of Aristotle's books. And what it meant to go to the university in 1000, 1200, whatever, was to study Aristotle's books. And we have Aristotle because of Plato, and we have Plato because of Socrates. Socrates executed by his fellow citizens and launched a generation of the most important Greek philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle. I have a question for you, though. The reason that we are still talking about Socrates the man, and here we're going to transition to Socrates the myth, is because of how inspirational he was. Question, think to yourself, who is the most inspirational person you know? Don't say anything. Just think in your head. Who is an inspirational person to you? Can we hear from a couple 8th grade ladies? Who were raised there? Inspirational person. Madeline. Anybody who's in your head. Inspirational. What makes you want to be a better person? Anybody? If you're in a jam, you can name one of your classmates. Avery, your dad, boom. Also, piece of advice, hint, hint. If you're in a jam about the most inspirational person and you go to Oakland Academy, you can always say, Mr. Gotcha. Your dad. Who else is inspirational? Mel. Doesn't have to be someone you know. I've never met Socrates. Okay, a female soccer player on the national soccer team. Say it louder. Alex Morgan, inspirational, beautiful. Who else? Let's hear from a couple of our Form 7 students. Someone from whom we haven't heard yet. Max. Jesus is inspirational for you. Absolutely. Who else? With the color tie. Remind me of your name? Jack. What's that? Okay, your second name, Jesus. Jesus squared. Who else? Nicholas. Zach Gross. So, Zach Gross is inspirational for Nicholas regarding being a tight end. Notice what Nicholas is doing. He's saying, this is the person who is inspirational for me, and this is regarding what? Being a tight end. Right? Can we hear from a female in our Form 7? You upload this. One point. Inspirational. Yes, Fiona. Your mom. Absolutely. How? Say more. She's a role model. Beautiful. Good. Socrates, the man, inspired generations of philosophers, and he is now Socrates, the myth. Boom. Check out your handout. Let's talk about Socrates, the myth. We're no longer talking about a historical person when we talk about a myth, and here's why. Myth comes from the Greek word mythos, which means story. Socrates, the myth, write this down, lives on in stories. Jack, you writing this down? Socrates, the myth, lives on in stories. He shows us the life worth living. He lives on in stories. That's what it means to be a myth. It means to be a story. Shows us the life worth living. And Socrates, the myth, has inspired countless generations of philosophers worldwide. You might become a myth. You might. Nicholas, we're going to tell stories about you. Ethan, we're going to tell stories about you. Let's go with a couple ideas. We're going to end with his three children. Socrates started his journey about the life worth living with this idea. It's in Greek on your handout. The unexamined life is not worth living for a human being. Look at the Greek under part 2. Ho de anexetatos bios ubiotos eto. Ho de anexetatos bios. Do you see this word bios? What does that sound like with a raised hand in English? Bios? It kind of sounds like being. That's a mistake, but it's a really good one. Because bios and being do sound similar. They are not, but they're false friends. Right? Karen, those are false friends for you. Let's get a true friend. Christian, right? Sounds like bio. Because the word bio in English comes directly from bios in Greek. And bios means life. Hode anexetatos bios. Ooh, watch this. U biotos and propoi. The unexamined bios, the unexamined life, is not biotos. Now, this biotos, what does it look like? What are the words that look like in the sentence? Or sound like? Luke? Like, say the word in Greek. Like when you say it sounds like some form of life, what do you mean by life? Like what Greek word are you referencing? The one that Christian identified for us, right, Luke? How do you say it? Bios, beautiful. Luke knows Greek, and he just learned it 15 seconds ago. Will you please put your hands together? You're absolutely right. Biotos is an adjective based on the noun bios. So if a bios is not biotos, if a life is not, so we typically translate this, the unexamined life is not worth living. But do you know what Socrates actually said? The unexamined life is not livable. The unexamined life, bios, is not biotos. It's not livable. He didn't just say that going around aimlessly, not thinking about what you're doing, is not worthwhile. He said, if you're going around aimlessly, not thinking about what you're doing, not caring, not respecting other people, then you're not alive. And if you aren't paying attention, you aren't even alive. That's Socrates' first idea when he wakes up in the morning. He says to himself, how should I live? His first idea is, I better pay attention. I'm going to examine things. I'm going to think about things. By the way, we can have fun inverting this statement. Because it's stated in the negative, isn't it? When you read your paper for me, the unexamined life is not livable for a human being. What is the opposite with a raised hand of unexamined? Daniela? Examined. Write that down. Under unexamined, write examined. The opposite of unexamined would be examined, according to Daniela. What is the opposite of not livable? What is the opposite? Can you hear from somebody from whom you haven't heard? Then livable, beautiful. Write that under not livable. If we invert Socrates' famous dictum, the unexamined life is not livable, it's not livable for human beings. What do we get? What do we get? In the positive. Bobby? The examined life is livable for a human being. Alright, so we're going to examine life. That's Socrates' first idea. Here's a second idea. It's not in your paper, so you're just going to have to check out Reader's by the air and my bow tie and my His second idea is, well, if I want to figure out how to live, I should go to someone who knows how to live. I should find someone who is wise, wiser than I. So Fiona talked about her mom as a role model. Socrates says, who can I find who's a role model? All I know is that I don't know. So I need to find someone who does. That's Socrates' second big idea. Is that I don't really claim to be wise. So I need to find someone who is wise. And he says, who can tell me who is wise? Maybe God can. And one very common place for an ancient Greek to go to ask these big questions was the oracle at Delphi. Apollo is said to have spoken through a prophetess at Delphi. And so you would go there and you would kind of enter a little room. In the room, you peeked in the room where Apollo shined. You would see a girl. She's sitting on a stool. She's a little bit shaky. And if you're Socrates, you go in and you say, excuse me. Will you ask Apollo, please? I know you look like you have shapes. You don't look well. And I know it's your job to kind of take these requests. Will you please ask Apollo, who is wiser than me? And the priestess, she's called the Pythia, she would utter something. And it would be a Greek poem. And she would write it down. Actually, the priest would write it down, whatever she said. And you would take it away with you, kind of like a fortune cookie, and you would crack it open, you would read it. And what Socrates' fortune, what his oracle, his oracular pronouncement said was, no one is wiser than you. Well, that's kind of helpful. No one is wiser than I am. But it's not really helpful because it doesn't really say that Socrates is the wisest, right? It just says, no one is wiser than him. So, is there anybody in this room who's really good at ping pong? Wow. And we can choose something else. Is there anybody in this room who's really good at Quidditch? Grace, that's impossible. Put your hand. I am not good at Quidditch, but guess what? None of you are better than me. None of you are better at Quidditch than me. Does that mean that I'm good at Quidditch? No. So Socrates learned that no one is wiser than him. So he said, well, let's test this out. And he went to different people to say, okay, who is wise? And he goes to 4 people, these are worth writing down, who people think are wise. And we might have the same kinds of people today, so let's be on the lookout for them. He goes to, drop these down in the margins, the politicians. He goes to the artists. He goes to skilled craftsmen. And, sorry, but he goes to parents. Hey, I don't care. I got 3 dudes. He goes to politicians, artists, skilled craftsmen, and parents, because those are the people who his fellow Greeks think are wise. So, who is willing to be a politician? With a raised hand. Nicholas, please join me up here. Okay, Nicholas, I'm going to be Socrates, and you're going to be a politician. Say hello, I'm Nicholas, politician. Please hold his mic. Say hello. Hello. Okay. Hello, Mr. Politician. Now, you're a politician, so that means you've thought a lot about communities and people and how people should get along and the greater good. So that gets me thinking about justice, Mr. Politician. because people think he's wise and he turns out not to actually be wise. Can we have an artist? Who is an artist? Remind us of your name. Yes. Juliana, will you be an artist? Stand up, take the artist's microphone. Oh my gosh, we are here today with one of the world's most renowned artists, Juliana. Juliana, if you have been an artist, you must have thought about the human condition and happiness and sadness and what makes a person good. So, can you walk? So, what makes a person good?
Well, see, there's a lot of different colors in this question.
Oh my gosh, colors. You like the colors. Okay, tell us about the colors of goodness.
Blue.
Oh, wow. How does blue make us better?
You just look at the world, you can see the colors, you can see blue in the sky, you're just so happy.
But I don't see the sky right now. What if I can't see the sky?
That's all.
And when I look at your art, is it going to make my children better? How's it going to help my children better?
That's about how you interpret it.
Thank you. But I need some help. Can you help me interpret? Thank you, Ms. Juliana, our artist. That was very impressive. So the artists seem to know what they're talking about, but they don't. They make good art, but when you actually ask them what makes a good person, they know as much about life as the politicians do. And then there are the skilled craftsmen. Socrates goes to, he says, these people are going to be wise because they know a skill. They know how to build computers. Or they know how to build cameras. Or they know how to build houses. Or they know how, to make things, right? And it turned out that these people as well, when Socrates asked them, what is courage? What is justice? They thought, because they know this one thing very well, that they would know all the things, and it turns out that they didn't. And he had conversations with these people publicly, just like he did with politician Nicholas and artist Juliana, and people kind of looked silly, and they were getting madder and madder at him, and then he went to the parents. And he went to one very wealthy parent in particular, Callias, who had 2 sons. And he said, Callias, you have 2 sons, don't you? And he said, absolutely, I do. And he said, well, where should we go to make your sons better? And he said, let's think about this, Socrates said. If your sons were horses, where would we go to make your horses better? With a raised hand, where would you go to make a horse better? Dylan? Where? A horse track or a stable? Who's going to be at the horse track or stable that's going to make your horses better? Who? A horse trainer. If your children were dogs, where would we go to make your children better? And here's a lady on this one. What's your name? Alexa? Everybody check out Alexa? Where would we go? Go to a doggy school, right? And he said, but your sons are not dogs. What are they? He said, they're human beings. And Socrates said, well then, where can they go to learn to be a human being? And Callias was angry because Socrates had semi-insulted his sons, calling them horses and dogs. And Callias, it turned out, knew how to make money, but he didn't know how to make children better. And Socrates says, I'm interested in making humans and citizens better. And all that happened is he made his fellow citizens mad at him. Well, the children, the youth, the teenagers, those of you who will be in Socrates School, really liked this because you could hang out with Socrates and you would watch him interview the politicians and the artists, and they would look silly, and you would get puffed up and you would think, wow, that's kind of cool. I can make people look silly by asking them, what is justice? And they didn't know, and they would stumble, and Nicholas is going to try this. powerful got angry and they said, "We're going to kill you. Shouldn't you stop?" And Socrates said, "No. This is the life of philosophy. The life of philosophy begins with the idea that only the examined life is livable. The life of philosophy begins with the question, is the next thing I'm going to do right? Is the next thing that I'm going to do just? Am I acting courageously right now? Am I acting temperately right now? Am I caring for my soul more than I'm caring? Am I caring for my mind more than I'm caring for money?" And his fellow citizens don't buy it. They charge him with making the youth corrupt. They put him on trial with 501 fellow citizens, and those 501 fellow citizens find him guilty on the charge of impiety and corrupting the youth. And the sentence that they give him, what do you think we should sentence someone for corrupting the youth? What's a good kind of punishment? Karen, drink hemlock. That's pretty extreme, but that's exactly the punishment that they gave him. Right? And here are his last words, and here's where his children come in, and we're almost finished. Here's where his children come in. I am Socrates, and you were the jurors who just condemned me to death. This much I'm going to beg from you. When my sons grow up, when my Isaac and my Hayden and my Eli, that was the story, but I'm reading Socrates right. Punish them. Punish my sons when they grow up, and make them feel pain in this very same way that I pained you, if they seem to you to care for money or anything else before virtue. And if they are reputed to be something when they're nothing, if they think they're big shots, and if other people think they're big shots when they're actually nothing, reproach them. Pull them aside, just as I did you. Tell them that they do not care for the things they should. That they suppose they're something when they're nothing, and if you do these things, fellow Athenian Mustangs, for me, we will have been treated justly by you, both I myself and my sons. If you pain my sons the same way that I pain you, you will have justice. But now it's time to go away, I to die, and you to live. Which of us goes to a better thing, as I will hear of everyone except God. And Socrates dies. And he leaves behind a wife, Xanthippe, and 3 sons. And hopefully some fellow citizens who have gotten the point that he really means it when he says that caring for your mind is more important than caring for money. He doesn't say money's not important, he just says your mind and your heart are more important. This mythic image of the philosopher has inspired countless generations of philosophers and thinkers down the ages. Let's wrap up with point number 3, Socrates, the school. Write this down. Socrates, the school, lives in Lincroft, New Jersey. Socrates, the school, shows us how amazing and capable teenagers are. How amazing and capable teenagers are. And it will inspire the next generation of philosophic citizens. Socrates, the school, lives in Lincroft, New Jersey, shows us how amazing and capable teenagers are, and it will inspire the next generation of philosophic citizens. Can you turn your sheet over and jot down a couple of ideas as we finish up? Given what you know about Socrates the man and Socrates the myth, if Socrates were to start a school, what would students do there? Jot down at least 2 ideas. Ready, set, go. If Socrates started a school, what would students do there? Juliana, our artist, is back.
The bigger meaning of life.
The bigger meaning of life. The colors of life, maybe? What else? Here's another question. One final question. And then I'm going to give you a send-off. Write this down. What do you hope for students at Socrates School? Whether that's you or whether that's not. What do you hope? What do you hope for the students at the Socrates High School, at the Untitled Chapter? And adults in the room, I want to hear from you on this one as well. Two things that you hope for students at the Socrates High School. Write it down. What do you hope, Daniel?
That they look inward and become better.
Thank you for that. What else do you hope? Let's hear it from one more. Here. Christian.
I hope that they learn things that will be of great use and help them later in life.
Things that will be of great use to them later in life. Beautiful. Can we hear from some adults? Everybody turn your heads.
To discover and explore their passions.
Discover and explore your passions. We can do good things and make it out. Awesome. Awesome. What else?
That students develop a deeper understanding of life and a well-rounded education.
Well-rounded education and deeper understanding of life. Look at these ideas. This is happening. What else?
That they would love just to learn and explore.
To love learning and exploring. That is a hope. That is a hope. Any final thoughts from our adults in the room? Jack?
I hope they go off to a good college and get a good job.
Okay, good college, good job. Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. At the Socrates High School, let me leave you with this idea. We're going to adopt some of Socrates, the man, and Socrates, the myths idea. Three things. We're going to adopt Socrates' view of the unexamined life, that kind of life is not livable. Secondly, we're going to agree with Socrates that for a human being, human and civic virtue is necessary. Thirdly, we're going to combine this understanding of human and civic virtue with the notion that some of you have already said that we also need professional skills, don't we? We also need basic knowledge. We also need career interests. Notice when Socrates interviewed the politicians and the artists and the skilled workers, he didn't say that their pursuits were worthless. He said, okay, do you also know about justice? Do you also know about what does courage look like? Socrates wants both, and at Socrates' school, you will get both. How will we do this? Three ways is what you're going to get. You're going to get small, personalized instruction, just like Socrates had conversations with one person at a time, or two or three in a small group. That's how we're going to teach and learn at Socrates High School. Second of all, you're going to have a community of like-minded peers, just like Socrates groups were curious. Socrates High School is going to be full of curious students being curious together. And thirdly, just like Socrates, we're going to have a mission for what matters. We're going to focus on communication. We're going to focus on collaboration. We're going to focus on critical thinking. We're going to focus on creativity. Just like Socrates the man and Socrates the myth. There is so much more to say about Socrates the man myth, and the school, but let's leave it at that. I just want to thank you for being here this morning. We do have time for Q&A if you want to kind of launch some of that. What do you want to know about Socrates, the man, the myth, or the school?
I have a question. What's a typical day look like at the Socrates School?
Typical day looks like we have different sessions that we're calling blocks. So instead of going to different classes, like period 1 is science, period 2 is math, we have blocks. So we might start our day with the Socratic Block, the Socrates Block, which is where we'll be reading great books and studying history for an hour or two every morning. Then we'll have a little break. Then we might move to an academic block where you'll be doing your math and science in a kind of very personalized way. Math and science classes. Then we'll break for lunch. Then in a good part of the afternoon will be spent pursuing your passions in hands-on learning. So either doing projects out in the community, or maybe you have internships. We're kind of looking at what are you super interested in. Plastics in the ocean, how do robots work? How can I make a better pencil? Or how can we improve nutritional systems for school lunches? These kinds of things. And you might spend a good part of your afternoon hands-on learning. And then also another part of your day would be an elective block. So all of you will be able to take classes that are only for you. So let's say you really want to learn computer programming. You might take a class in computer programming at your own pace. Let's say some of you might be interested in interior design. During your elective block, you can take interior design. So that's how we'll be spending our days. Reading great books, personalized math and science classes, project-based learning, and some electives. Other questions? Jack?
I just wanted to get you placed in the Science Center.
What's that?
Where's Socrates School?
It'll be in this building, in those two classrooms, mostly, right here where the foreign languages are right now. That's where we'll be hanging out most of our day. Science labs and science classes, however, will be in the science building. Yeah. Linda? There's going to be a foreign language requirement. All the Socrates high school students will take at least 2 years of Latin with me. And that's because Latin is unique in the ability to expand your word palette. Beyond that, though, Linda, you have opportunities to take other classes, other foreign language classes. I can also teach ancient Greek, so you can do Greek with me. It's a kind of foreign language elective. I can teach biblical Hebrew, so ancient Hebrew. You can take ancient Hebrew with me if you wanted. And then we have all kinds of other languages available: French, Spanish, German, a lot. Jack, again.
Can you study about like a lawyer or law?
Can you study? Absolutely. So there are a couple of ways. I mean, you can't become a lawyer because to become a lawyer. Actually, that would be a good selling point. Graduate with a high school degree in law. Boom. Right? There are a couple of ways that the Socrates High School can help you become a lawyer. First of all, fun fact. The test that everybody has to take to get into law school is called the LSAT. Do you know that classics majors out of college have the highest LSAT scores? That is, classics majors, that's what I studied in college, and that's what my PhD is in. Ancient Greek, Roman language, literature, and history, they have the highest LSAT entrance scores. Guess who has the second highest? Philosophy majors. So, if you want to go to law school, Socrates is an awesome place to start. Here's why. I can list these two things. The study of the great books that we'll be doing will include a lot of study of law systems throughout world history. It will help you read texts closely. This is part of why classics majors have the highest LSAT scores, because we are highly trained in paying attention to the words on the page. And that's a lot of the work that attorneys do, is really tracking arguments very, very closely with words on the page. Thirdly, a study of Latin will help you in law. Again, the word power there, the attention to detail. A decent amount of law pertains to kind of Latin phrases, about the Socrates School, I'm having a hard time answering because it's everything. The fact that you get really close attention. The fact that there will not be a lot of students in the Socrates School, which means that you get me almost one-on-one, day after day. You get other mentors at Hotel Academy in very close connection, day after day. So that personalized instruction is not something that is available at very many high schools. Even other really, really good high schools, it's very challenging to have close discussions. Part of that kind of close personalized interaction will be with each other. So a lot of our classes will be discussion. It'll be very, very little of me up in the front of the room kind of lecturing at you and you frantically taking notes and then taking a test and then forgetting it and then taking notes and taking a test and forgetting it. It'll be a lot of discussion. And as Socrates kind of experienced back in ancient Athens, that's one of the best ways to learn. It's just to have a really close, in-depth conversation with a teacher and some fellow students. So if I had to pick one thing, I might do it. Max. Right now, we don't have sports, but there are one of the advantages of Socrates School is that if you play sports at a club or some other kind of travel, then we're really flexible with schedule. In a typical high school, you have to be at school from 7:30 or whatever it is to 3 o'clock. You cannot leave for this or that. But at the Socrates High School, let's say you're on a traveling tennis team and you have practice every day at 2 o'clock. Well, you could leave early and go kind of have your practice with your team. You could schedule, and we can kind of just work things out schedule-wise. We don't know yet, I'm just going to be honest, we don't know yet about possible collaborations with your local public high school. Are they going to let you play on their team? We don't know that yet, but we're working.
And how long will the school day usually be?
School day will be from around 8 in the morning till around 3. So Bailey is asking how big do you think the classes will be? We don't know yet. Probably we would love for there to be around 10 students per grade.
Is there any data out there that if they go to the Socrates School, that they be more successful at the next level as compared to another student at another school? Is there any data out there?
So is there any data that students who go to some place like Socrates School will be more successful? Places like the Socrates School are not very common, so there's not a lot of data about that. However, there is a lot of data on skills. So, for example, we do have data about what graduating college students, what percentage of them think they're ready for the work world. And we have data from employers about how many of their college graduates that they've hired are actually ready. And guess what? There's a big difference. Students who have gone through a traditional education think they're this ready. Their employers think they're about here. So there's a disjunct right now between the kinds of skills that students are learning in traditional high schools and colleges, on the one hand, and on the other hand, what employers actually want. So, for example, I own a business. I hire people all the time. I really do, actually. I really do own a business. And I own a coffee house in Ocean Grove. And you might think, wow, what are some skills that it takes to own a coffee house? Well, all my baristas are professionally trained up in Manhattan. So you might say, Dr. Lipp, wow, when someone applies to your business, you might want someone who really knows a lot about coffee. And I say, I actually don't care. Or they might say, well, you really probably want someone who knows all about coffee prices and how to pour a perfect shot of espresso and how to grind coffee. And I say, I don't care. Similarly, many firms, other businesses, start as people who are washing the windows, whatever they're doing, and now they're high level. They're in charge of finance, they're in charge of management, What are the skills they got from there? And they interviewed thousands and thousands of these people, and here's what they found. Had nothing to do with college degree, had nothing to do with the specific technical skills that they had nothing to do with how much money that their family had, their kind of money background, their demographics, and nothing to do. Here's what it had to do with. Those people were most successful, and these are the skills that we're going to focus on. I mentioned them briefly again in my talk. Those skills are how well can you communicate with your teammates? How well can you collaborate? When Daniel and I sit down and solve a problem together, how good is he at sharing his ideas with you? That's communication. Also, how good is he at listening to mine? Listening. How good is he at thinking outside the box, creating? When we have a problem, man, we can't get this server to work. It's not a question of technology, technological expertise. It's a question of, can I generate different ideas and apply them to the problem? By the way, that's creativity. And that's what Google found, is that they care that the people who were successful, they weren't testing for this, Mustangs. They found this after the fact. They were the best communicators, collaborators, listeners, creative thinkers. Same thing in my business. I don't care what you know about coffee. What I care about is that you have a spirit of hospitality and you have a curious mind. I had someone apply to my coffee house called Odyssey Coffee, by the way, after Homer's Odyssey, last summer. And we sat down in the interview and he said, okay, well, you definitely want to hire me because I roasted coffee for 7 years here, and I was a barista here. And I said, well, every barista here goes through extensive training out in Manhattan, so we're all on the same page. And he goes, how? He looked at me, sweet thing. It's last June. He goes, I don't need to do that. That's the face of the name. I don't need to do that. I already know everything. Boom, go. You're not hired. Why? No one knows everything. No one already knows everything. That's what I care about. That's what Google cares about. That's what people care about. How curious are they? So that's kind of a long-winded answer. We don't have data on specific schools like this one. We definitely have a lot of data about what employees are looking for and how to get it.
One thing that's back from college employees. How do children that were with 9 out of 10 for high school transition to a 50,000 in college?
So they're going to Ohio State University.
I think
Yeah, they transition.
you know.
No, absolutely.
How do they know what to do when they get their freshman year in their dorm room? They just spent the last 4 years with 9 kids and you.
Right, absolutely. So I did this myself, so I can actually just tell you what I did. So I actually went to a high school like Socrates High School, back in Columbus, Ohio. That's where I'm from. I went to a high school that I did my math and science at my public high school, and then the rest of the day I spent doing projects. So this program called Mosaic still exists. It chose one student from every public high school around, and we met downtown every day after you did your math and science, and we just did projects. We did a lot of reading, we did a lot of writing, we interviewed a lot of people, we did internships based on our passions. And so I had this community of about 20-ish peers. And then I ended up going to, which is tiny, right? I ended up going to the nation's largest university, the Ohio State University, which right now has about over 70,000 students. The way that I did that worked is I realized, wait a second, I'm not going to hang out with 70,000 people. I'm going to find my tribe of 20. So I just focused on, and this is what I can help students kind of focus on is, okay, when you go to a massive place, you're not going everywhere there. You're just going to find your little community, find your niche. similar question. They said, well, Oak Hill Academy is kind of a small place. Isn't that kind of like a bubble? And, you know, isn't it better for students to go to a big public high school so they have a lot of experience being around a lot of people and being kind of a little fish in a big pond? Isn't that more like life? Similarly, 10 years ago, someone said to me, you go to Ocean Grove every summer? So for 15 years, my wife and I would summer back and forth from Columbus, Ohio to Ocean Grove. And how many of you have been to Ocean Grove? Okay, so a lot of you. It's kind of like a bubble, right? It's kind of like a beautiful little town. And someone said to me, I said, I love Ocean Grove. It's the community. We know everybody. We sit on our porch and we jam on guitars in the evening. And it's really, we can walk everywhere. And this person said, yeah, that's not reality. And my response to my friend Ocean Grove, and my response to this person who was concerned about Oak Hill Academy as a bubble, my response maybe about the college, I think is similar. Is that everywhere I go, there's a small community where I can belong. If you can help me find it. It's not that Ocean Grove isn't reality, it's a reality. It's not that Oak Hill Academy isn't reality, it's a reality. And there are plenty of little communities like that at Ohio State. And that transition, in fact, from small Socrates High School to big Ohio State University might be a helpful exercise in thinking about, well, what do I really care about? I'm going to find the people who really care about what I care about. And that might mean you end up in whatever career track or whatever major you end up in, you kind of hang out with those. I hope that helps. It's a little bit of a response. Find our tribe.
I'd like to make one comment. I come from an education background. So what I've noticed here at Oak Hill Academy, and what I'm hearing about Socrates, is a smaller setting. And in the smaller setting, to be successful in life, I think you need people skills. And I think with a smaller setting here and in Socrates, I think you have a better opportunity to learn better people skills, which makes you successful when you go to the next level. And I think that's an important part that you have to consider when you're thinking about school and stuff. I'm sorry, I was a guidance counselor back in the day, so this is right in my alley.
Absolutely, the people skills are essential, and that's one way of framing what Google found, right? And what a lot of employers are saying is that what we really want are people skills, because we can teach you anything, right? Anybody can learn computer programming. Anybody can learn, believe it or not, anybody can learn open heart surgery. If you can change the battery on a car, you can learn open heart surgery. They're just open mechanics, right? You can learn how a thing works. But you know what's harder to teach? Is listening. It's creativity. I've learned those things best. I think Socrates students learn those things best sitting at a round table, looking at your peer across the table and saying, what do you think about this problem? And taking the time to listen. We learn these people skills by practice. And we'll be doing that a lot in Socrates. Yeah, thank you for that.
Would you have like financial literacy classes where they about taxes and like all of that?
Yes. Yes. Are we going to have classes on financial literacy? You remind me a little bit of a meme that I saw a couple of months ago. How many of you know what a meme is? Now, many of you probably know that there are a lot of words on memes that I can't repeat in front of you, but this was a meme, and it was a guy who he was holding a hammer in his hand, and you could see, and he had his laptop open to like TurboTax or some tax program like this, and he was swinging the hammer. He was in the process of swinging it, and he was saying, with words I can't repeat, darn high school education, they taught me how to play underwater badminton, but I never took a class in expected this question. I can't tell you. Here's why. Because Mr. Patel is in over there. Homework to me is not an end in itself. So I've been teaching 14 years, and I never assign homework just so you have homework. If we get to a point where you need a little extra practice, and outside of class is the time to do it, then let's do that. Historically, I assign very little homework. That happens very, very little. But another reason I can't talk to you about homework, I can't give you the answer, is because your education at Socrates School will be very personalized. So you'll be going at different paces, and if you're working a little bit slower, maybe you need some time out of class, maybe you do. But I can tell you that as a teacher and as a parent, I have 3 children, right? I work very hard to make the time that we are in school the time for doing schoolwork. And make the time that you are not in school the time that you are doing the other things that matter in life. Like you're being with your family. Like you're doing sports if that's what matters. Like you're having dinner every night at home or whatever it is. So I hope that's not a cop-out, but I can't answer the question, yes, 30 minutes every night. Yes, 60 minutes every night. No, I've never had that view. If you need to do it once in a while, that's fine. We're going to be really thoughtful about our time in school and out of school. That's my only answer. Like clubs or that kind of thing? None yet, but those are things that we're looking forward to the kind of first and second generation of Socrates students developing. So we're just going to kind of wait and see what interests we have, and if we want to develop some clubs organically, we can do that. Yeah.
Is this like an actual high school, like CPA, or do you like classes?
It's an actual high school, so we'll meet here every day. We'll be in those 2 classes. Some, maybe part of the reason they've been confused, I think, is maybe I haven't explained some of it really, really well. Some of the classes will be our Socrates block, our humanities, our literature and history block. Everybody will take that on campus with me, and we'll be doing that together. Your academic block, your math and science, we're going to partner with a really, really incredible online school called Laurel Springs School, and you'll be selecting your classes that way. So you'll be working online here, right? But you'll also have a math mentor here at Oakville Academy, so you get questions on site, and same with science. Does that make sense? And then your electives can be a mix of maybe with me, who works something out, maybe a teacher nearby, or online. But it is an actual school, and we will be here every day. Yeah. Are there specials? Like art and music? Yes. So you have, as part of your elective option, you'll be able to take a wide range of art classes, wide range of music classes, and in fact, as we're saying, a wider range of electives than at any other high school in the area. Because we're not limited to just the 1 or 2 teachers we have here. Because we have, with this online platform, you can take hundreds of different courses. Absolutely. Bailey? So Bailey's wondering about, can I answer that first? Bailey's wondering how long will the electives be? Depends. Right now it's 1 elective per semester, but towards an